Okay, so in a previous video we did our semicircle setup with Harry here, and we used one light, and you may have heard me refer to that as the key light. So in this video we're going to be extending that to a 3-point lighting system, introducing 2 more lights to produce the kind of perfect look that we can. So as I said before, the aim of this key light is to basically illuminate all of Harry's face, leaving a slightly dark side on the left. One of the things that I often look for is something called the Rembrandt triangle, which is kind of like a lighting technique that you'll see. Once you see it, it's difficult to unsee it, certainly in like Hollywood movies and any kind of dramas that you might see on TV. And this is basically where we're just casting over one side of our subject's face and we're leaving a triangle on the opposite side to the key light. That's the first thing I do, and you can achieve that basically with height and positioning within that semicircle around our subject. And in terms of some other considerations, in terms of what we control with that key light, we're going to be thinking about temperature, and we're going to be thinking about how bright we want it to be. So with the temperature, we want his skin tone to look quite natural. And in terms of exposure, don't want that side of his face to be completely blown out. So that's just a case of trial and error really, just adjusting that brightness until his skin looks good on camera. There are various tools that you can use on camera to solve some of those issues around temperature and exposure. So with exposure, we'd be looking at zebras and histograms, which you can look at some videos on YouTube of. And then in terms of the temperature, we'd be looking at white balance. And again, on some cameras, you might find histograms where you can find the information around that. So bringing in our second light into this picture then. So this is what we would call our fill light. And this is basically gonna just fill in some of that darkness that we've achieved on the opposite side of the key light on our subject's face. So if we were to be quite, dramatic about this, then Harry would have an extremely dark side of this face. Certainly on the B cam, we might run into issues where it's too dark and we'd end up with grain and noise. So this fill light is basically just filling in that gap, bringing it up a little bit so that we're not completely underexposed on this side of Harry. So that's what this light here would be. We would just bring that in to the other side of the B cam. And this is going to be super low. This is going to be probably only a few percentage in terms of brightness. And often with this fill light, I would go quite warm. I don't really want to suddenly blast lots of cold light onto this side of the face because it's already quite dark. You can basically just make it look a little bit more artistic by bringing up some kind of warmer tones on this side. So yeah, this is just set to 3%. So it's really just, it's not doing a lot. It's literally just picking it up ever so slightly. So the third light that I want to look at in this 3-point lighting system is the backlight. And this is basically just a way of creating a little bit more separation between Harry and his background. So I often use quite small lights for this. You don't need anything too powerful, but this is something that would just sit behind Harry. It might be on a clamp or it might just be on the floor. And it's just going to create a slight halo around his head or around his back and shoulders. And that's just going to kind of add a bit of subtle separation between your subject and their background. Now, one thing to note is that we want to avoid any kind of glare or reflection. So as Harry is today, if someone is wearing glasses, you want to kind of avoid that light shining directly in and then out to a camera. So often quite an easy trick to get rid of that is to raise the light. But yeah, it's just a case of maybe moving it around or moving it up so you're not getting that direct bounce off to camera. So one final light that I would add to my setup normally is what I would term a wash. So this is basically where we're going to place some color behind Harry with an RGB light, a smaller RGB light, and that's just going to create a little bit more separation and also just look a bit more artistic.